Hello, and welcome to the English Channel, a simple space for curious minds and growing English skills. We explore exciting topics, amazing books, and real-life ideas, all in clear, easy English. Whether you're learning words, practicing listening, or just love good stories, this podcast is for you.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Liam.
And I'm Lisa. Great to be here.
Today, we're really zeroing in on something huge for, well, so many people aiming for international study or work. We're talking about the IELTS exam.
That's right, the International English Language Testing System. It can feel like quite a mountain to climb, can't it?
It really can.
But getting your head around the right strategies, it's not just about passing. It's about seriously boosting your chances of hitting those scores you absolutely need.
Exactly. And look, there's so much advice out there. It's overwhelming. So we've kind of done the legwork. Today is all about distilling the best techniques, the approaches that actually work into stuff you can use right away.
Think of it as your practical guide.
Yeah, your roadmap through the IELTS. So what's the plan for this deep dive?
Okay, so we're going to tackle each main section: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. We'll break down what each one involves, but more importantly, the key techniques to really succeed in them.
Right. Things like managing your time, which is always crucial.
Definitely. And how to approach different question types effectively, building the right kind of vocabulary, understanding what the examiners are actually looking for.
The assessment criteria. Yeah, that's vital.
Exactly. And making sure your practice is, smart practice, focused.
Okay, sounds good plan. Let's kick things off then. Where should we start? Listening.
Let's do it. The IELTS listening section. First thing to know. It's the same for both academic and general training tests.
Okay, that simplifies things a bit.
It does. It's about 30 minutes long, 40 questions, split into 4 parts.
And you get points for correct answers.
Yep, 1 point for each correct answer. Now, if you're doing the paper-based test, you get an extra 10 minutes at the very end just to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.
10 minutes, okay.
But if you're on the computer, it's different. You only get 2 minutes at the end to check things over. You type your answers directly as you go.
Good distinction. So, paper gets transfer time, computer means typing as you listen.
Pretty much. A lot of people find just maintaining concentration for that whole 30 minutes across 4 different recordings quite tough.
I can imagine, especially since you only hear it once.
Exactly. That's the big challenge. You hear each recording one time only. No repeats. And there aren't any pauses between the parts either. It just flows from one to the next.
Wow, okay. So focus is absolutely key.
Totally. Which brings us to time management within the section. You get a little time, maybe 30 seconds after each part, to check your answers for that part.
Okay.
But here's a useful tip. You can actually use the time when they're reading the instructions for the next part.
Use that time.
Yeah, use that time to look ahead at the questions for the upcoming part. Read them, underline keywords, get a sense of what you need to listen for. It gives you a real head start.
That's really smart. Instead of just zoning out during the instructions, you're actively prepping.
Exactly. Every second counts.
Okay, so let's talk question types. You mentioned 4 parts. What kind of questions pop up? Fill in the blanks.
Yep. Fill in the blanks are common, especially in part 1, which is usually a conversation about everyday stuff, and part 4, which is typically a lecture or talk.
And the key there, word limits.
Absolutely crucial. Pay super close attention to instructions like no more than 1 word and/or a number. Stick to it. If you need a unit like dollars or cm and it's not already printed, you must write it.
Got it. What else for blanks?
Spelling, especially names. They often spell out names or tricky words, so listen carefully. And be aware of distractors.
Distractors.
Yeah. The speaker might mention some wrong information first, maybe correct themselves, or another speaker gives the right detail. So don't just grab the first number or word you hear that seems to fit. Wait for confirmation.
Okay, good warning. Don't jump the gun. What about multiple choice? They can be tricky.
They can. Again, read the question and the options carefully before you listen. Here's the thing with multiple choice. You'll often hear keywords relating to all the options, A, B, and C.
So they deliberately mention things related to the wrong answers?
Often, yes. Or the information is mentioned, but it doesn't actually answer that specific question. So you can't just listen for a keyword match. You need to understand the meaning of what's being said in the context of the question. Focus on the overall conversation.
Right, understanding the gist, not just word spotting. Okay, what about matching questions or map labeling? Maps sound intimidating.
They can feel that way. For map labeling, first things first. Orient yourself. Know your basic directions: north, south, east, west, left, right, opposite, next to.
Okay, basic geography.
Yeah. And before the audio starts, look closely at the map. See what's already labeled. Those are your anchor points. The description will usually relate new locations to those fixed points.
So use the existing labels to build a mental map.
Exactly. And if you miss one answer, honestly, just move on. Don't get stuck on it or you'll miss the next one too. The audio keeps moving.
Good practical advice. Don't dwell on mistakes. Okay, so those are in-test strategies. What about preparing before the test? How do you actually get better at listening?
Practice is everything, but it has to be the right kind of practice. One really effective method is listening with the transcript.
How does that work?
You find an audio recording with its written transcript. Listen to the audio. When you hit a part you don't understand, pause it. Look at the transcript, see the exact words, then listen to that bit again.
Ah, so you connect the sound to the text.
Precisely. Then, after you've worked through it like that, listen to the whole thing again, but without the transcript this time. It really trains your ear.
That sounds much more active than just passively listening.
It is. Another key thing is getting used to different accents.
Right, IELTS uses various accents.
Mostly British and American, though you might occasionally hear Australian, New Zealander, or Canadian. But the main ones to focus on are British and American.
So how do you practice that?
Use authentic materials. Listen to podcasts. Watch news broadcasts, maybe audiobooks, read in those accents. Get your ear tuned to the rhythm and sounds of natural speech. Interestingly, the speakers in the actual test are usually quite clear, but practicing with faster, more natural speech can make the test feel easier.
Like training with heavier weights, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. And finally, you absolutely need to use official practice tests.
Like the Cambridge ones.
Exactly. Cambridge English practice tests are the gold standard because they're made by the same people who make the real IELTS exam. They replicate the difficulty, the format, the question types.
So doing those tests is key.
Yes, but not just doing them. The real learning happens when you review your mistakes. Don't just check the answers and see your score.
What should you do?
Get the audio script for the test. Go through every single question you got wrong. Read the script, listen again, figure out why you got it wrong. Was it spelling? Did you misunderstand the question type? Did the accent trip you up? Did you fall for a distractor?
Ah, pinpointing the reason for the error.
Exactly. That tells you where your weaknesses are, so you know what to focus on in your next practice session. It's targeted improvement.
That makes total sense. Using mistakes as a guide. Okay, brilliant insights for listening. Shall we move on to the reading section?
Let's do it. So, IELTS reading. It's 60 minutes, 40 questions, 3 sections or passages.
60 minutes seems tight for 3 long passages and 40 questions.
It is. Time management is probably the single biggest challenge here for most people.
Okay. And is it the same for academic and general training, like listening?
The structure is the same. 60 minutes, 40 questions, 3 sections. But the content is different. Academic uses texts from journals, books, newspapers, more academic topics. General training uses texts you'd encounter in everyday life or workthink notices, ads, company handbooks, leaflets.
So the GT texts might be a bit more straightforward.
Generally, yes. The language and topics are less academic. But interestingly, because of that, you usually need to get more questions right in general training reading to get the same band score as in academic reading.
Oh, right. The scoring adjusts for the text difficulty.
Exactly. So back to time. How do you manage that hour?
Yeah. Any strategies?
A common recommendation is to allocate your time roughly. Maybe spend about 15 minutes on section 1, 20 minutes on section 2, and save about 25 minutes for section 3.
Because section 3 is usually the hardest.
Typically, yes. The texts get progressively more complex. But look, that's just a guideline. The key is, don't get stuck. If a question is really baffling you, take your best guess, maybe mark it, and move on. You can always come back if you have time at the end.
Better to attempt all questions than perfect half of them.
Absolutely. Every question is worth 1 point. And keep an eye on the clock. In the paper test, the invigilator might only give a couple of warnings, maybe 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left.
So you need to self-monitor.
Yes. Write down the start time in your question paper as soon as you begin. And crucially, for the paper test, remember there's no extra time at the end to transfer answers, like in listening.
Oh. So you have to write answers on the answer sheet within the 60 minutes.
Correct. A good strategy is to transfer your answers after completing each section. Finish section 1, transfer those answers. Finish section 2, transfer. It breaks it up and avoids a mad rush at the end.
That sounds much safer. Okay, what about actually tackling the passages? Read the text first or questions first?
Good question. There are basically two main camps. The text-first approach works well if you're a confident, fast reader in English. You read the passage fairly thoroughly first to get the main ideas, then you tackle the questions, referring back as needed.
And the other way.
The questions first strategy. This is often better if you're less confident or want to be very efficient. You start by reading the title and any subheadings to get the topic. Then maybe quickly glance at the types of questions. Then read the first question carefully.
Okay.
Then you scan the passage, specifically looking for the part that relates to that first question. Most question types follow the order of the text.
Ah, so the answer to question 1 will usually be before the answer to question 2.
Usually, yes, not always, but often enough that it's a good starting strategy. Once you think you've found the relevant bit for question 1, slow down, read that part carefully, check the question again, and choose your answer. Then move to question 2 and continue scanning from where you left off.
That sounds very methodical. Avoids reading stuff you don't need yet.
Exactly. It helps focus your reading. Now, vocabulary is obviously huge in reading. Do you need to understand every single word?
I was going to ask that. Some texts look daunting.
They can be, but no, you absolutely do not need to know every word. Often, the really obscure words aren't even needed to answer the question.
Really?
Yeah. Focus on understanding the question first. Then scan for the information related to that question. If you hit an unknown word in that relevant section, try to guess its meaning from the context, the words around it. Often you can still understand the main point or find the answer even with a few unknown words. Don't get bogged down.
That's reassuring. Focus on the task, use context. Are there any common traps or tricks to watch out for?
A big one is relying only on keywords. Test takers scan for the exact word from the question in the passage.
But the answers are usually paraphrased, right?
Exactly. They use synonyms, different sentence structures, related ideas. So just scanning for identical words is often misleading. You need to look for the same meaning, expressed differently.
So understanding is key, not just matching.
Right. That's why reading the relevant section carefully once you find it is so important. And highlighting can help too. As you read, underline or highlight key names, dates, places, concepts. It helps you find things again quickly if you need to check back. You can do this on paper or using the highlighting tool on the computer.
Good tip. Okay, let's quickly touch on specific question types again. Any general advice for answering?
General tip, don't rush your analysis. Read the question and all the answer options very carefully. Look for keywords, yes, but remember the paraphrasing. Trying to eliminate wrong answers, crossing them out mentally or physically, can really help narrow down the choices.
Process of elimination.
Definitely. And if you're truly stuck after thinking carefully, make an educated guess. There's no penalty for wrong answers, so never leave a blank.
Right. No negative marking. What about true, false, not given? Those can be tricky.
They are probably the trickiest for many. You need to decide if the statement in the question agrees with the passage, true, contradicts it, false, or if the information isn't mentioned at all, not given. The key is distinguishing false from not given. False means the passage says the opposite. Not given means the passage just doesn't say.
Okay, requires careful reading and matching headings.
For matching headings, you're matching a list of headings to the correct paragraphs. The heading should summarize the main idea or topic of that specific paragraph. Read the paragraph, decide its main point, then find the heading that fits best.
And multiple choice in reading, similar to listening.
Similar principle, yes. Read the question stem carefully, read all the options, find the relevant part in the text. One option will be the best fit according to the text. The others might be partially true, mention two words but be wrong, or simply not be supported by the passage. Careful comparison is needed.
It all sounds like it comes back to practice and review again.
Absolutely. Reviewing your mistakes on practice tests is critical. Look for patterns. Do you always struggle with true, false, not given? Do you run out of time on section 3? Identifying those patterns tells you what skills to work on.
And improving reading speed. Just read more.
Pretty much. Read English every day. Try to read material similar to IELTS texts, news articles, magazines, academic journals for academic, maybe workplace documents, official websites, articles for general training. The more you read, the faster you'll get, and crucially, the more vocabulary you'll absorb naturally.
Makes sense. Consistent exposure. Okay, let's shift gears again. IELTS writing. 2 tasks in 1 hour.
Yep, 60 minutes total for task 1 and task 2.
That sounds intense.
It is. You need to be disciplined with your timing. Task 1 requires at least 150 words, and the recommendation is to spend about 20 minutes on it. Task 2 needs at least 250 words, and you should aim for about 40 minutes.
So double the time and more words for task 2.
Exactly, because Task 2 carries more weight in your overall writing score.
Okay. Now, task 1 is different for academic and general training.
Completely
Okay.
different. Academic Task 1 gives you a visual, a graph, chart, table, map, or diagram, and you have to describe and summarize the main information in a formal academic style.
Reporting the data.
Precisely. Identifying key trends, comparisons, significant points. You need to use relevant data from the visual to support your description. Good paragraphing, logical connectors, accurate vocabulary are key, and importantly, no speculation. Just report what you see.
Right, stick to the facts presented. And general training task 1.
That's letter writing. You'll be given a situation and instructions on who to write to and what points to cover, usually as bullet points.
Okay, like writing to complain, request information, arrange something.
Exactly. The first step is to figure out the purpose and the tone. Is it formal, like writing to a company manager you don't know, semi-formal, maybe to your landlord, or informal to a friend?
And the tone needs to be consistent.
Yes, throughout the letter. Use the right opening, dear sir, madam, dear Mr. Smith, hi John, and closing, yours faithfully, yours sincerely, best regards, cheers. Make sure you cover all the bullet points given in the task.
Don't just mention them, expand on them.
Yes, add relevant details. Don't just write one sentence per bullet point. But also, don't add irrelevant information. Stick to the task, and of course, write incomplete sentences.
Okay, clear instructions there. Now, task 2 is an essay for both tests.
Yes, Task 2 is an essay for both academic and general training, responding to a specific question, viewpoint, or problem. You need to present a clear position, develop your arguments logically, and support them with reasons and examples.
What's the structure like?
Usually an introduction setting out the topic and your main idea or plan, then body paragraphs, each developing a main point with support, and finally a conclusion that summarizes your viewpoint and links back to the question.
And the style? Formal.
Generally formal for both, especially academic. You might be able to use a slightly more personal tone in GT, depending on the question, but academic conventions like clear topic sentences and supporting evidence are still important.
What are examiners looking for in both tasks? You mentioned assessment criteria earlier.
Right. There are 4 key things they score you on, equally weighted. Task achievement, or task response for Task 2. Did you answer the question fully and appropriately? Coherence and cohesion is you're writing well-organized, paragraphed logically, and easy to follow with good linking words. Lexical resource, did you use a good range of vocabulary accurately and effectively? And grammatical range and accuracy, did you use a mix of sentence structures correctly?
Okay, so you need to hit all 4 areas.
Exactly. It's not just about good grammar or good ideas, it's the whole package. And leaving time to edit is vital. Catching errors in grammar, spelling, or vocabulary before you finish can make a real difference.
Editing time is crucial. Got it. Okay, that covers writing. Let's move to the final piece, the speaking test.
Right, the speaking test. This one's face-to-face with an examiner, or sometimes via video call now. It's quite short, usually 11 to 14 minutes.
And it has 3 parts.
Yes, 3 distinct parts. Part 1 is the introduction and interview.
What happens there?
The examiner introduces themselves, checks your ID, and then asks you general questions about familiar topics, things like your home, family, work or studies, hobbies, interests. Fairly straightforward stuff.
And how should you answer? Just simple answer.
No, definitely not. Avoid short yes-no answers. Aim to give fuller, more descriptive responses. Add reasons, explanations, maybe a brief example.
So extend your answers naturally.
Exactly. And a really good technique here is to try and paraphrase the question in your answer. Don't just repeat the examiner's words. Use synonyms, maybe antonyms with negatives, different sentence structures. It shows off your vocabulary and grammar range.
Ah, good tip. So if they ask, do you like reading? Don't just say, yes, I like reading.
Right. You could say, yes, I'm quite keen on reading, or actually, I find reading really enjoyable, especially novels. Something like that. It sounds more fluent. It demonstrates better language skills.
Makes sense. What about part 2, the long turn?
That's the one. You get given a cue card with a topic and some bullet points telling you what to include in your talk.
Okay.
You then have exactly 1 minute to prepare and make some notes. After that minute, you need to speak about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes continuously.
1 to 2 minutes talking nonstop.
Yes. The examiner will tell you when to stop. It's really important to address all the bullet points on the card during your talk.
So use the preparation minute wisely to structure it.
Absolutely. Plan a beginning, middle, and end. Think about the points you need to cover. If the topic is, say, describing a person, don't just list adjectives. Give examples of their actions that show those qualities. Make it concrete.
Describe, don't just list. Got it. And aim for the full 2 minutes.
Ideally, yes. Keep talking until the examiner stops you. It's better to be stopped than to finish too early after only, say, 45 seconds.
Okay. And then part 3?
Part 3 is the discussion. Here, the examiner asks more questions, but these are related to the broader theme of your Part 2 topic. They tend to be more abstract, asking for opinions, comparisons, predictions, reasons.
So a deeper conversation.
Exactly. It's moving away from personal experience into more general issues and ideas. Again, give detailed answers, explain your viewpoints, provide reasons and examples, show you could discuss ideas more deeply.
Okay. So any overall tips that apply across the whole speaking test?
Definitely. Number 1, be descriptive and elaborate. Give full answers. As I said, it's better to be interrupted than to give one-word replies.
Don't be afraid to talk.
All right. Second, for Part 2, read that cue card carefully in your prep time. Make sure your notes cover all the points. Third, use natural English.
Yeah.
Don't try to force in complex idioms you're unsure about, but if they come naturally, great.
Be yourself, linguistically speaking.
Yeah. Fourth, speak clearly and at a moderate pace. Don't rush. If you have a strong accent, slowing down slightly can help with clarity.
Good point.
And finally, practice. Speak English as much as possible. Record yourself talking about different topics, maybe answering practice questions. Listen back, check your fluency, your grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. Even 10-15 minutes a day makes a difference to be here.
Today we're tackling something really vital. Mastering spoken English, especially when you're under pressure.
Yeah, those high-stakes situations. Think job interviews, big presentations, maybe even just crucial conversations where you really need to get your point across clearly.
Exactly. And what we've done is pull together some, well, frankly, fascinating insights that go way beyond just knowing grammar rules or having a huge vocabulary.
Right. This deep dive is really designed to give you, our listener, a genuine edge in those moments. It's about a more effective way to communicate when you feel that pressure building.
And we'll highlight some surprising things that actually make a huge difference, things you might not expect.
It's all about getting that practical knowledge quickly, thoroughly, so you walk away feeling genuinely confident, like you're really equipped, you know?
So, what can you expect to take away from our chat today? Well, first, we're going to really unpack what makes spoken communication effective, looking beyond just words and grammar.
And we'll definitely pinpoint those common mistakes. The ones that can, unfortunately, trip you up, maybe lower your score in a test situation, or just stop you expressing yourself clearly.
We want to help you avoid those pitfalls.
And, importantly, we'll show practical strategies, things you can actually use to help you sound more natural, more confident when you speak.
Plus, we'll get into what really separates, the good speakers from the truly high-level, impactful communicators. What is it they do differently?
Okay, so where should we start? There's this common idea, isn't there, about needing to be super formal.
Ah, yes, the illusion of formality. Let's dive into that. So many people seem to believe that in an important situation, they have to adopt this almost stiff, robotic way of speaking.
It's a really common instinct, isn't it? But I think it often comes from stress, maybe feeling a bit inexperienced, or just thinking formal equals serious and professional.
But here's the twist. It's often counterproductive. That extreme formality can actually create distance.
Absolutely. It can hinder connection.
Right.
Research and, frankly, just experience suggests that a more natural conversational tone actually builds rapport much more effectively. It makes people trust you more, listen more closely.
Which is exactly what you need when the stakes are high. You want people to connect with you and your message.
So the goal really should be aiming for something more, well, natural, conversational. Think about how you'd talk to a colleague you know and respect about something important at work.
Yeah, that kind of engaged, genuine tone. Not overly casual, obviously, but authentic.
Let's take an example. Someone asks, where are you from? A very formal, maybe slightly stilted answer might be, I originate from the city of Manchester.
Right. Grammatically perfect, perhaps,
Yeah.
but it sounds a bit detached, impersonal.
Exactly. Compare that to something like, oh, I'm from Manchester originally, but I've been living in London for about 5 years now. Really enjoy it here.
See the difference. It answers the question directly, but it adds a little bit of natural detail, a human touch. It feels much more like a real conversation starter.
And that small extra detail, that genuine touch, it doesn't just answer the question. It actually opens the door for a little more connection. It shifts it from just, question answer transaction to actual human interaction.
Which is often key to making a positive impression, whether it's an interview or any important meeting. That little bit of warmth.
So that's the formality trap. But there's another common strategy people use under pressure that can also cause problems. Preparation, specifically memorization.
Oh, yes. The urge to write out perfect answers and learn them by heart, especially for questions you anticipate. It seems like a safe bet, doesn't it?
It really does. But experienced listeners, like examiners in a test or even just, managers in an interview, they can usually spot memorized answers a mile off.
They can hear that lack of spontaneity, that slightly unnatural delivery.
Precisely. And the big risk is, if you're relying only on those pre-learned scripts, what happens when they throw you a curveball? An unexpected question.
You're suddenly off script and might struggle to adapt.
Exactly. Those unexpected questions are often put in specifically to see if you can think on your feet, if you can communicate genuinely beyond the script.
And even if they stick to predictable questions, memorized answers often lack that natural flow. They can sound a bit disjointed, and it makes it really hard to respond naturally if they ask a follow-up question based on what you just said.
Yeah, because you weren't really saying it, you were reciting it. It's like, imagine trying to have a real conversation with someone who's just reading lines from a play. It feels very disconnected, very inauthentic.
It breaks that connection we were just talking about.
Totally. So instead of pouring energy into rote memorization, the focus should really be on, learning how to develop answers naturally.
Developing them, what does that look like in practice?
It means thinking about the core idea you want to convey and then building around it, supporting it with maybe a brief explanation, a relevant example, or some pertinent details, just enough to make your point clear and engaging.
So not just a one-sentence answer, but not a memorized paragraph either. Something in between that feels constructed in the moment.
Exactly. Think about it like this. You start a new job. You meet a new colleague in the break room. You wouldn't launch into a pre-rehearsed speech about your career history or hobbies, would you?
No, that would be incredibly awkward.
Right. You'd have a normal conversation, back and forth. You'd respond to what they say. You'd share things naturally. That's the kind of energy, that authentic presence you want to bring even to more formal, high-stakes situations.
It's about being present and responding genuinely to the interaction as it unfolds.
Precisely. Responding, not just reciting.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've covered formality and memorization. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the content of what you say, specifically this tension between quality, quantity, and complexity.
Yes. This is a big one. There's often a feeling that longer answers are always better answers, or that using really impressive complex words is the key.
But that's not necessarily true, is it? Let's break it down. First, the quantity part. You can't just give super short, undeveloped answers.
No, definitely not. If your answers are too brief, you're simply not giving the listener enough information. You're not really demonstrating your ability to talk about the topic, to articulate your thoughts properly. It can come across as, uncooperative or lacking ideas.
Right. You need to give them something to work with, show your communication skills. But then there's the other extreme.
Exactly. Trying too hard, pushing yourself to use incredibly complex vocabulary or really convoluted sentence structures, especially if you're not 100% comfortable with them.
What happens then?
Well, you risk making more mistakes. For one, using a word slightly incorrectly or getting tangled up in complex grammar. And perhaps even more importantly, it can really damage your fluency.
How so?
Because you're constantly searching for that impressive word or trying to construct that perfect complex sentence. It makes your speech hesitant, unnatural, stop-start. It actually hinders communication rather than helping it.
So the effort to sound advanced can actually make you sound less competent overall.
That's often the case, yes. The guiding principle should always be clarity first, then accuracy, then naturalness. Focus on communicating your ideas, effectively tell of it, using language you know well.
It reminds me of that analogy. Sometimes a simple screwdriver is much more effective than some overly complex, multifunctional gadget you don't really know how to use properly.
That's a perfect analogy. Simple, clear, accurate language is usually the most powerful tool. And, it's worth remembering that most people learning English, especially at an intermediate level or higher, already have enough vocabulary and grammar to communicate effectively in most situations.
It's not necessarily about learning hundreds of new fancy words.
Not primarily, no. It's more about using the language you do know confidently, accurately, and appropriately. Getting the basics right and communicating your message clearly is far more important than trying to shoehorn in complex structures that might not even fit naturally.
Okay, clarity and naturalness over forced complexity. That ties nicely into our next point, which is about fluency itself. It's a word we hear a lot, but what does it really mean in this context?
That's a great question because there are some common misconceptions. Many people think fluency just means speaking really, really fast with absolutely no pauses at all.
Like a machine gun.
Haha, sort of, but that's not actually natural speech, is it? Native speakers pause all the time.
True. We pause to think, to breathe, to structure our thoughts.
Exactly. And those natural pauses are perfectly acceptable, even expected, in good communication. They can actually be a good thing. They give you a moment to gather your thoughts, and they signal to the listener that you're considering your response carefully, not just blurting something out.
So fluency isn't about eliminating pauses entirely.
Not at all. It's more about the overall flow. It's about speaking smoothly and coherently without excessive hesitation, without constantly stopping and starting because you're searching desperately for words or getting stuck on grammar in a way that really disrupts the listener's ability to follow you.
So it's about avoiding those long, awkward silences or too many ums and s that break the connection.
Precisely. And this connects back to what we just discussed about complexity and accuracy. Here's a really critical point. If you become absolutely obsessed with being 100% grammatically perfect in every single utterance,
Which many learners understandably strive for.
right, but if that becomes your only focus, it can actually kill your fluency. You become so worried about making a tiny mistake that your speech becomes slow, hesitant, really stilted. You sacrifice flow for the sake of perceived perfection.
And the overall impact is actually worse communication.
Often, yes. So it's about finding a healthy balance. Strive for accuracy. Of course, clear communication needs reasonably correct grammar and vocabulary, but don't let the pursuit of perfection paralyze you. Allow yourself to speak more smoothly, more comfortably, even if it means an occasional minor grammatical slip.
The main goal is effective communication, being understood clearly.
That's the bottom line. A natural, reasonably fluent flow, even with minor imperfections, is usually much more effective than technically perfect but hesitant, unnatural speech.
Okay, great. So we've covered these core ideas. Naturalness over forced formality, developing answers over memorizing, clarity over complexity, and fluency with natural pauses over robotic perfection. How do these principles apply in, say, a typical speaking test structure? Because those often mirror real-world communication challenges.
That's a really good way to look at it. The different parts of a speaking test are often designed to assess different communication skills you'd use in real life. Understanding the goal of each part can help you apply these principles effectively.
Right. So often these tests start with some general getting to know your questions, don't they? Part one, usually.
Yeah, everyday chat. Questions about your work, your studies, your hobbies, where you live, things like that.
So for this part, applying our principles means
It means focusing on those natural conversational answers we talked about earlier. Don't just give one-word replies. Expand a little bit. Remember the "where you from" example. Give a direct answer, but add a little natural detail or context. Show you can engage in simple, everyday conversation comfortably.
make it feel like a real friendly chat, not an interrogation.
Exactly.
Mm.
Then you often move to something like part two, where you might get a topic card and have to speak about it for a minute or two. That sort of mini presentation or monologue.
This can feel quite daunting for people, speaking alone for that long.
It can, but again, the key is naturalness. You'll usually get some bullet points on the card suggesting things to cover. Use them as guides, absolutely, but don't feel like you have to rigidly follow them in order or cover every single one if it doesn't feel natural.
So they're prompts, not a script.
Precisely. And a really effective strategy here, one that often leads to much better fluency and engagement, is to try and connect the topic to your own experience. Tell a short, relevant story or anecdote if you can.
Why does that help so much?
Because you're talking about something real, something you know well. You're not having to invent ideas on the spot as much. You're drawing on memory, on personal feelings, and that usually makes your language flow much more naturally. Your intonation, your pacing, it all becomes more authentic.
That makes sense. Easier to talk about your own holiday than some abstract concept.
Generally, yes. And one thing to definitely avoid here is forcing your talk into some kind of rigid, pre-learned template. Like some people are taught to always structure it as past, present, future, or something similar.
The PPF method, yeah.
Right. Now, that might work for some topics, but trying to shoehorn every topic into that structure can sound really artificial and actually make it harder to speak naturally. If it doesn't fit, don't force it. Focus on covering the topic coherently in your own way.
Okay, good advice. Then there's often a part 3, which usually involves more abstract discussion-type questions related to the part 2 topic.
Yes, these tend to be more analytical, maybe more academic in style. They require more developed answers, exploring different viewpoints or implications.
So here you really need to show you can discuss ideas in a more complex way.
Exactly. This is where you might use phrases like, well, on the one hand, some people argue that. Or another perspective to consider is, you're showing you can think critically and structure a more complex argument.
But what if you genuinely don't know much about the topic they ask about in part 3? That can happen, right?
Absolutely, it can. And it's important to know that it's okay to admit that. You can say something like, that's an interesting question. To be honest, it's not something I've thought about much before, but perhaps.
So acknowledge the limitation, but still try to answer.
Yes, don't just shut down. Acknowledge it briefly, but then make an attempt. Try to speculate, offer a possible idea related to something you do know. The goal here is still to demonstrate your communication skills, your ability to understand the question, structure a response, and express yourself clearly, even when dealing with a less familiar topic. It shows resourcefulness.
It's about showing how you communicate, not necessarily proving you're an expert on everything.
Precisely. Your ability to handle the communication challenge is what's being assessed.
Okay, this breakdown is really helpful. So let's maybe consolidate now. Based on everything we've discussed, what are the absolute key mistakes people should try to avoid in these high-stakes speaking situations? Let's list them out.
Good idea. Number 1, definitely. Answers that are too short, undeveloped, just not giving enough information.
Right. Mistake number 2.
That robotic, overly formal delivery we talked about at the start, it just creates a barrier and sounds unnatural.
Got it. 3rd.
Trying too hard to impress with overly complex language, using big words incorrectly or getting tangled in grammar, it backfires. Focus on clarity.
Makes sense. 4th mistake.
Relying on those memorized answers. It kills spontaneity and makes you vulnerable to unexpected questions. Big stumbling block.
Yeah, we covered that.
Mhm.
And the 5th key mistake.
Focusing too much on perfect grammar to the point where it destroys your fluency. That obsession with avoiding any error can make your speech hesitant and difficult to follow.
So short answers: robotic delivery, forced complexity, memorization, and grammar perfectionism at the expense of flow. Those are the big ones to watch out for.
Those are definitely key pitfalls.
Okay, so now let's flip it. What are the positive characteristics? What defines really effective, high-scoring, or just generally successful spoken communication? What should people aim for?
All right, on the positive side, first and foremost, that natural conversational style. Approachable, confident, relatable.
Number 1, be natural. What's next?
Well-developed answers. Providing enough relevant detail, maybe explanations, specific examples to really illustrate your points and make them clear and impactful.
So substance matters. Go beyond the surface.
Definitely. Third, answering the question directly and coherently. Making sure your response is actually relevant to what was asked and that it flows logically. Easy to follow.
Don't go off on tangents. Stay focused.
All right. Fourth, using appropriate vocabulary and grammar accurately. Notice the word appropriate. It doesn't have to be incredibly advanced, but it should be correct and fit the context, serving the goal of clear communication.
Accuracy and appropriateness over sheer complexity. Got it. 5th.
Maintaining good fluency. Speaking smoothly, with natural pauses for thought, not excessive hesitation, demonstrating comfort with the language.
That balanced fluency we discussed. And lastly,
Clear pronunciation. This is fundamental. If people can't understand the words you're saying easily, the rest doesn't matter as much. Being intelligible is key.
natural style, developed answers, coherence, appropriate language, good fluency, and clear pronunciation. That's a pretty solid checklist for effective speaking.
It covers the core elements, definitely.
Now, you mentioned appropriate vocabulary. Let's touch on something related that often comes up. Idioms and natural expressions. Should learners try to use lots of idioms?
Idioms. It's a common question. Idiomatic language, which includes not just classic idioms like bite the bullet, but also things like phrasal verbs, look into, give up, and other informal expressions can certainly make your English sound more natural and engaging. Native speakers use them all the time.
So using them is generally a good thing.
It can be. But here's the crucial caveat. You have to use them correctly and naturally. Forcing idioms into your speech where they don't quite fit, or using them slightly incorrectly can actually sound worse than just using simpler, clearer language.
Right. It can sound like you're trying too hard again, or that you don't fully grasp the meaning or connotation.
Exactly. So the advice usually is, don't feel pressured to memorize long lists of idioms and sprinkle them everywhere. Instead, focus on learning a smaller number of common, useful ones, especially phrasal verbs, and really understand how and when to use them appropriately.
Quality over quantity, again.
Precisely. A few well-chosen, accurately used idioms or phrasal verbs that sound natural in context are far more effective than dropping lots of them awkwardly. I sometimes use the birthday cake analogy.
Oh, how does that go?
Well, your basic, clear, correct vocabulary and grammar, that's the solid foundation, the cake itself. Essential. Then things like idioms, more advanced vocabulary, maybe more complex structures. Those are like the frosting and decorations. They add flair, they make it look impressive, but they need to be added appropriately on top of a good base. Too much frosting or weird decoration choices can ruin it.
Haha, I like that. Build the solid cake first, then decorate wisely.
That's the idea. Focus on the core communication and add the flair naturally where it fits.
Okay, fantastic. So we've covered the principles, the pitfalls, the goals, the nuances like idioms. How can listeners actually practice all of this effectively? It's one thing to understand it, another to implement it.
Absolutely crucial point. Practice needs to be focused and strategic. It's not just about talking more, it's about how you practice.
So what are some concrete strategies?
Well, first, if you're preparing for something structured like a test, treat each part, the initial chat, the monologue, the discussion, as a slightly different skill to practice. Understand the specific communication goal for each part. Don't just practice answering random questions.
Tailor the practice to the task.
Yes. And really focus on understanding the question and thinking about how to articulate your answer clearly and effectively, rather than just trying to survive the question or get through it quickly.
Deeper engagement with the task. What else?
Getting feedback is invaluable. If you can, practice with a teacher, a language partner, even a knowledgeable friend, and ask for specific constructive feedback on these areas we've discussed. Fluency, development, naturalness, clarity.
External perspective is key. But what if you're practicing alone?
Recording yourself is an incredibly powerful tool. Use your phone, record yourself answering practice questions, or just talking about a topic for a couple of minutes.
Okay, I've recorded myself. Now what?
Now comes the hard part. Listen back critically. Be honest with yourself. Ask, did I actually answer the question? Was my answer developed enough or too short? Were there lots of unnatural pauses or hesitations? Was I searching for words constantly? Did my vocabulary sound natural and accurate? How is my pronunciation?
So self-analysis based on the criteria we've outlined.
Exactly. And to take it even a step further, try transcribing short segments of your recordings, actually writing down what you said.
Transcribing, why is that helpful?
Because seeing your spoken words written down makes things like grammatical errors, unnatural phrasing, repetitive vocabulary, or fluency issues jump out much more clearly than just listening. It gives you very concrete data to analyze.
Ah, I see. It makes the patterns more visible.
Definitely. Then, based on all this, the feedback you get, your self-analysis, your transcriptions, identify your specific weaknesses. Are you consistently giving answers that are too short? Are you overusing certain filler words? Is your grammar shaky in certain areas?
Pinpoint the problems.
And then consciously focus your practice on improving those specific areas. If your answers are too short, practice deliberately extending them with examples. If you overuse, practice pausing silently instead. Targeted practice is much more efficient than just general conversation.
Makes perfect sense. Practice smarter, not just harder.
That's the essence of it.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a huge amount of ground in this deep dive. If you had to boil down, what are the absolute key takeaways for our listeners aiming to master spoken English in those crucial moments?
I think the big themes are prioritize naturalness and clarity over forced formality or complexity. Focus on developing your answers with relevant substance details examples. Strive for a balance between fluency and accuracy, remembering that natural pauses are fine. And crucially, be aware of those common pitfalls like over-reliance on memorization or giving answers that are too brief.
Yeah, that seems to capture it well. Naturalness, clarity, development, balance, and avoiding those common traps.
And practice strategically, using feedback and self-analysis to target your specific weaknesses.
We really hope you, our listener, can take these insights and think about how to apply them. The goal is to help you feel more confident and communicate more effectively the next time you're in one of those high-pressure situations.
Absolutely. It's about empowering you with understanding and practical tools.
And that leads us to a final thought for you to ponder after this discussion. Think back to the last time you felt really pressured to communicate effectively in English. Maybe an interview, a presentation, an important call. Reflect on how that went. Now, considering everything we've talked about today, what's one specific thing you learned or realized during this deep dive that you could perhaps apply differently next time you face a similar situation?
That's a great reflective exercise. Just one small change based on these ideas could make a significant difference.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this deep dive into mastering spoken English.
Yes, thank you for tuning in. We really hope you found this discussion valuable and insightful.
If you did find it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like this discussion, perhaps share it with friends or colleagues who might also benefit, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this one.
Your support helps us continue bringing you these focused analyses. And remember, you've just invested about an hour in really digging into strategies designed to make you a more confident, clear, and effective communicator in English. Use it well,